So good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Sorry for the slight delay. We had a few technical errors just getting started, but we are all on board now. Thank you to everybody who's joining. I will say this is a particularly popular webinar. We have had some big news in the world in the past week. We won't really talk about politics or anything like that, but needless to say, I can see it's created a lot of interest in moving to Portugal from the US. I'm seeing a lot more inquiries coming through. I'm sure Sandra is the same. I'd like to talk maybe later on, Sandra, about what you think the effects of that might be in terms of delays and things like that. But for the time being, we're going to talk about just basically how you can move to Portugal. We'll address some of the most important visas or the most common visas and which documents you need. And basically, we're here just to give you all the information you need to make this as smooth as possible. And I've got nobody better to do the job than Sandra Gomes Pinto, who has been on many, many times before and answered lots and lots of questions about the different visas. But Sandra, some people will be joining for the very first time, so perhaps you could just let everybody know a little bit about yourself and your team and how you got started.
Yes. So thanks so much, James, for having me. It's a great pleasure to work with you always. We appreciate your directiveness, your transparency, your honesty, and also the fact that you're being of service to provide information to all our audience and to all those that want to move to Portugal. I think it was really a great idea that you start with Portugalist. And in some place, we also think we are part of your project a little bit. And we both grew with one another. And it's for us, it's also a pleasure and an honor to be part of this with you. Although now you are bringing our competitors to the game, but I think transparency, honesty, it's the name of the game. So people are free to choose the best professionals and the ones they feel more comfortable and they feel more they can rely on. So I think it's very interesting. So it's a great honor for us to be here with you. I apologize for the delay, but I always divided a little bit on doing webinars, providing information, writing articles, and also attend to all those that are reaching out to us. And of course, I have a great team that is working very hard, but I also like to have the hands on the job and to also be attentive and to make sure that we are providing the best answers and do the best work to all those that are reaching us. So at this time, we are trying to answer all those that contacted us because we had many contacts. Many people fear an authoritarian regime in the US. So we had immediately after the elections, we got a lot of contacts of people that previously had contacted already and now said, now we are ready to go. About myself, I'm a lawyer for 30 years in Portugal. I worked nonstop always with foreign clients, with American clients from the start. One of the first projects I took part was the enlargement of the bridge 25 de Abril, and American Bridge were one of the important players over there, which were Americans. So 30 years ago, I started working with Americans and Germans intensively in Portugal, which was not the norm for the majority of the lawyers. So I've worked nonstop with foreign clientele and the people coming to move to Portugal and to invest. I also had very complicated and somewhere in the media important litigation cases. And I also talked a little bit all over the world, in Brazil, in the UK, in Germany, in Malta, about investment in Portugal, tax benefits, immigration, litigation, and other matters. So I do have a big overview of the Portuguese legal systems, which helps, and it's very important when complicated issues arise. If someone has a proposal from the consulate not to accept a visa, I think it's of a major benefit to have a litigator that knows exactly how present things, so knows exactly how attach proof, because I'm very aware and know very well how decisions are made. And decisions are made both from any decision maker in a legal field, both from an emotional point of view and also a very material and proof-based point of view. And in that case, we know very well the law, and we are also know very well the procedure law, so we know exactly how to present cases whenever there are difficulties. We have many of our clients that had minor criminal things that were a long time ago, and we know exactly how to present it. And we can tell that in tough cases, we are always able that until now, that our clients had a successful visa, although themselves, they didn't believe in themselves many times. So we are really able to make the dream come true for many people that wanted to come to Portugal and thought this was rather difficult. In these last 8 years, me and my team, we focus a lot on helping people that are moving and investing in Portugal. The majority of those are Americans, although we have Canadians and British also coming to Portugal. And one of our goals is to make sure that from a legal point of view, this is flawless, although this is a great challenge because we navigate in a world of unstandardized bureaucracy. As you probably mentioned several times ago by now, just in the end of October, we are surprised because all of a sudden in the US, they started requiring FBI background checks apostilles, where previously all those that were coming with sealed envelopes were ready to go. So we had to adapt many of the cases from our clients. So we are always, each day, learning more about the process and trying to help in a better way our clients from a legal point of view. We also, I think, a little bit, we feel we like to be of service here in my team, and we like to make sure to have an important contribution to make the life happier, healthier, smoother for all those that are moving to our country. So this is the great goal from our team, basic from a legal point of view, and to navigate them in a world of unstandardized bureaucracy, of discretionary powers, of subjectivity, but we try to make some reason, some rules out of the chaos that is the general behavior of the consulates, that each have different practical behaviors in each of the in each country.
Yes, thanks for that, Sandra. I think some people don't appreciate the job, the career that you've chosen for yourself, where you're dealing with consulates who have one set of rules and IMA who have another, and neither of them are necessarily out to serve you. You're not they don't view you as their customer. So you have stuck in a difficult place of trying to get information for clients and relay
Yes.
that back to them. It isn't always easy.
No, it isn't. It is not easy at all because it's hard to contact the consulates. We manage to do, but it's hard. It's hard to get, and it's hard because many times they just refer to the official lists when we try to clarify points that are where there are contradictory positions. Yes.
Well, Sandra, I think we should get into the questions for the different visas. Before
Okay.
that, I just wanted your opinion. I don't know if you've decided on this yet, but with the increase in people coming to
Yes.
Portugal, what do you think, or interest in people coming to Portugal, what do you think this effect could potentially have on, say, getting an appointment at a consulate, for example, or maybe later getting an IMA appointment?
Until now, it has been reasonable. So we always had some delays in the consulates, but it could overcome them. So I think if people want to come, this is the moment to come, and people should do it ASAP. As I told you previously, I believe that sooner or later, the requirements for the D7 will be different and more demanding. Just having the financial means of the Portuguese minimum wage, 820 euros per month, which is more or less the equivalent in dollars. $820 per month is a very low amount from a financial point of view in the US. And I believe that sooner or later, perhaps sooner than later, this will change. So I think if people want to come, this is the moment to come.
Yes, I can see that changing as well from a practical point of view. Even in Portugal, I mean, people who earn 820 euros a month, it's, that is the minimum amount that you need. That doesn't stretch very far in places, in certain parts of the country. Also, it would be very easy for IMA to cut the amount of work they need to do just by raising that bar and reducing the number of people who are eligible for it. So if they're looking to cut their numbers in the future.
And I believe Europe is a limited space. As you know, from an European point of view, Portugal is not totally free in terms of external policy. So I believe that sooner or later, the European Union will want to limit they just don't want that Portugal is an open door to Europe as it is. I think the D7 probably is one of the least demanding visas that grants you the possibility on a first stage to reside in Portugal and to travel freely within the Schengen space. You can also, at this point, benefit from our healthcare system, from our educational system, which can be a great advantage, and also travel freely within the Schengen space. And you have an easy access later to Portuguese citizenship, which is still one of the best passports of the world. And that when you have a Portuguese passport, you can reside, live, work, retire in any European country, which is a great advantage. And on top of that, you'll have the civil, the political, the democratic rights of the civil rights of an European citizen, which at this point, how the world stands, is a great asset. And Portugal is a place of tolerant people. It's a place of democracy. We were one of the first countries in the world to abolish death penalty, and yet we are still one of the safest countries in the world. We accepted gay marriages a long time ago. So we are always very, very tolerant towards people that are different than us, and we extremely welcoming. So this, I think these are great advantages for all those that want another solution for them and want to get out of social life or a world that is polarized, and where aggressiveness rules. So I think this is quite important. Probably as a disclaimer, we won't be able here to cover all your questions, but please, and also my team, it is very tough to answer the question this moment. So what I advise you to do is please send us an email. As always, the first 50 that send us an email and put Portugalist and SGP, your partner to move to Portugal, our keywords. If you send us an email, we will be more than glad to provide you the answers and to provide you with a 15 minutes free call. So those who want it as a disclaimer, because probably we won't be able to get into all your specific questions, but in the office, we will try to address and answer as many questions as we can, as we always have done.
Okay, thank you for that, Sandra. And I'm going to put your email address in the chat. I'll also send out an email after this with a copy of the recording, and I can put it in there as well, just in case anybody misses it. Okay. So we were talking about the D7. We mentioned all the benefits of it, and you said 820 euros per month. That's for an individual. For a spouse or partner and children, how much would someone need to add?
So for each wife, each spouse, you have to have the 50% extra. So at this point, it would be plus 410 euros. And for each child, you'll have to have 30% extra for each child. So if it is a family of 4 people and there is only one main applicant, because there is also the possibility of each of the spouses to come under independent visas. So it would be 820 plus 50% plus 30% plus 30% if you have a family of 4 with 2 children and a spouse, and all are coming under the husband's visa or the wife's visa. This is how you do your accounting for the D7 visa.
Okay, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought about doing it the other way. I guess if one, if both parties just had a minimal amount of income, then they could apply and add a child to each one.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This is why it's so important to address also specific cases and to seek what is the best solution for each person. And yes, but Portugal still, even for those that have children, I think it's an incredible country to raise children. We are very, very tolerant towards children. The Portuguese generally like children, and if we compare with US, what you may pay for public universities here, it's quite impressive. We don't have student loans, and this is maybe very, very important for families.
Okay, and then in terms of the documentation that you need, Sandra, first of all, what would you say are the main documents that people need to think about gathering?
So I will have to take a list because I always have lists and I always check. I would say the D7 and both visas, and it's important to know that both the D7 and the Digital Nomad visas and all other visas different from the Golden Visa are residential visas. And in many, many situations, they have the same regime. So in a very, very general terms, the 3 pillars of both the D7 and also Digital Nomad visa is people have to show financial means, people have to show proof of accommodation, a lease, a house, in some cases, term of responsibility of someone allowing to leave them in their home. And the 3 pillar is that you have to show that you're not a criminal, so you have to show your criminal record, although it's easy and a clean criminal record. Although if you have minor things that happened a long time ago, this could be overcome if you portray things the right way before the Portuguese authorities. So the big important aspects for each visas, residential visas, are financial means, proof of accommodation, and an FBI background check. And then there are many, many little details that we can go into specification when people talk with us or when people hire us, because it's difficult to appoint everything, every document they may ask. Just recently, we had some clients where they did ask for a copy of the driver's license. Very recently, we had some clients where they did ask for a tax return, where they did ask for the mobile of the landlord. So each day there is a novelty. So in other places, they just throw away the tax return. And so we have the details of the documentation, we will go into them with the clients, and also taking into account the specific consulate, because each consulate works in a different way. Just very recently, we knew of a person, it was not our client, but she went to San Francisco. She didn't have a money order or a cashier's check, and they sent her away. They didn't even give her the chance they should have to present the fee for the VFS within 10 days. So it's really difficult to say in a very general way what are the documents needed. But these are the main important things that you have to bear in mind when you are thinking about one of these visas to see if you're eligible or not.
Okay, and in terms of the documents themselves, are there any ones that need to be apostilled or notarized?
Yes, some have to be apostille and some have to be notarized. The ones that have to be apostille are public documents from your country of residency or nationality, meaning see if you have birth certificate of children, that you need if they are coming as accompanying family member. So these have to be notarized. A marriage certificate, although many things waive this formality, a marriage certificate, according to Portuguese law, since it is a public document, it should be notarized to be enforceable here. Another document that has to be apostille, that has to be apostille, is the FBI background check. The apostille, as you probably know, because I've been telling this a lot of times, most of the countries enter something that is named the Convention of Hague. And so whenever a country apostilles a document, a public document of their own, this is saying to the other country, to the public authorities of another country, this US document, this US FBI background check complies with US laws, and therefore it can be enforceable in Portugal or in any other country. And this is the same with the FBI background check, and this is the same with a birth certificate. It's important to bear in mind that, for instance, bank statements or personal statements or application forms don't have to be notarized. Those have to be apostilled. But
Okay.
if you are applying in the UK, they will throw away the notarization of an application form. So if you are applying in the UK, you should not notarize the application form.
Okay. Good to know. Okay.
If you are going to in Manchester, you have to there even have additional details. So you have to be very carefully how you do your process, how you prepare your file, because there are still subjectivity and different requirements for place to place.
Okay, and I imagine, yeah, doing your research, if you try sort of doing it online, you could very easily make mistakes because one person could be saying, "Well, I did this," and not really say where they did it. And they might have done it 3 years ago, and since then the consulate has decided we want to do things differently.
Or they found a person in a very good mood, or they someone in a very bad mood, or they found someone that was new in the office. So we understand that new consulates sometimes have people that have very different practical behaviors and practical demands. So it can vary. There's a
Okay.
lot of contradictory positions. So what we do in the office, and I say it as a disclaimer, we sometimes try to have such a complete process with everything they could possibly ask, so people do have a bulletproof process. But sometimes it's difficult. It's a hard work because we want to clients to send us all the documents, because we want to check, double check, triple check, and to make sure they have everything. And sometimes we also have a hard time with clients because we are behind them to get all these documentation. So it's really hard work and
Yeah.
a picky word. So this is what we try, because we want to make sure we don't want them to fail the appointment.
Okay. Well, that is important, and you know what's the safest route. So hopefully, clients will understand that.
If you are in a position to apply for D7, this for sure will be the safest route, the most well-known, the easier route to apply, and the less demanding in terms of financial means.
Okay. Let's say that I'm applying for the D7. I have my passive income, say a pension or social security, but I also do some remote work. Maybe I earn a few thousand a month. Should I mention the remote work, or could this confuse things and then think I should be applying for the remote work visa?
This might confuse things, and we have clients where initially, when just the D9, the digital nomad was, now they call in many places D9, when the digital nomad visa appeared, we had some clients that mentioned also work, and the authorities turned this D7 into the D8, which may be a problem because these clients had enough money from both for both visas, but some people might not have. So it might not be good to mention that they do work, because this might jeopardize their D7 visa. So it's very important to take a look and to bear in mind the specific situation of the person, and to address specifically and with all the effort that the visa requires. I believe that could be super organized people that could do it on their own, but with everything that entails moving to another country, many times
Mhm.
moving to another continent. I myself, if I was to immigrate to the United States or to the United Kingdom, I would never there, knowing what I know, and even though I'm proficient in English, which is not the case of the majority of people that are moving here, I would never dare to do it without the help of a good professional. So I think some people might be able to do it on their own, but there's a lot of things that you can lose, a lot of money that you can lose, and sometimes just knowing some of the details, and then they forget to do small stuff that could have a bigger impact and could mean thousands of euros in the end of the day, because they didn't want professional help.
Okay. It sounds like on the one hand, you need to gather all the documents in the world, but then you need someone like you to say, actually, let's show them these documents, but maybe
Yes.
not these ones, depending on the consulate.
Yes, and
Or
depending, but there's things that we cannot never predict. So we will never predict what the specific person will take a look when the person is in a consulate. So there are things that are unpredictable, so it's better to be prepared.
when you mentioned before, and I think this is probably a confusing topic for people, but the idea that you need an address in Portugal before you move to Portugal, there were two options that you met, or three, but we'll focus on two. One was renting a place, one was buying a place. Is there any difference in how the authorities look at this? Like if you have bought a place in Portugal, is that more favorable because it shows, your commitment to living there?
I've never seen a difference.
Okay.
Of course, when you see someone that bought a house, you see this person is super committed. They invested in Portugal. So
Hmm.
they feel, but I never seen a difference in treatment from
Okay.
those that bought a house from those that leased an apartment. I think if you meet the other requirements, and if you have the FBI background check apostille, and if you have all documents in place, and if you show your financial means and why you're moving to Portugal and all the details, and also that you show that it's not a fake, because there were lots of firms and people advising for fake lease contracts. And
Okay.
the authorities started asking for the registration before the tax authority, a receipt, the proof that of transfer, so the mobile of the landlord 1 or 2 times. So there are the documentations are getting harder and harder with what they face from a practical point of view. Yes.
Okay. And if I already have a family member in Portugal, should I mention this in my personal statement? Would this help me that show that I already have some kind of tie to Portugal?
I think that's very favorable, and that's a positive aspect, because people want to see that you know the country, that you cherish the country, that you will want to integrate in the country, that you
Hmm.
want to give back to the community, the Portuguese community, that you learn the language. I think these aspects are very important to the consular authorities. So I think this is a beneficial element to address in your personal statement, and it's a positive aspect when other people are evaluating a visa process. I would not
Okay.
say it's mandatory.
Hmm.
I would not say it's super relevant, but I think it's favorable.
Okay. Let's see. So we've talked about the D7 quite a bit. I know there are more questions, and I should say we
I would
have.
like to add something. There
Hmm.
was a misconception that has been going for many, that's been happening for many years. So it's important to know that both the D7, the D9 or Digital Nomad visa, or any other residential visa, although they do not require any investment on the part of the visa holder, they are also routes for citizenship. People don't have to do a golden visa investment to obtain citizenship after residing in Portugal for 5 years. And if they do have a basic knowledge of the language and if they have a connection with the Portuguese community. So without any investment, if you reside here under a D7 or a D9 or on any other residential visa, this is always a route for citizenship after 5 years. And it doesn't, if you invest, it's not a better route or an easier route because you invested in Portugal. So I think at this point, these are in Europe, excellent visas.
Okay, that's really good to know. Yes, that is one thing that I see people ask about is like, oh, does this particular visa lead to
Yes.
citizenship? Because there seems to be confusion that some might give it and others don't. But as I understand it, as long as you do 5 years of
Yes.
living in Portugal, they all do. Is that correct?
Yes, and you have to have an A2 level of the language and also
Hmm.
you show that you are a strong connection with the Portuguese community. It's not a requirement itself, but the public attorney can oppose to your process if they find that you just meet the formal criteria and you don't show actually a strong connection to the Portuguese community.
Okay. Another misconception that I see from people is they assume because they haven't paid Social Security and lived in Portugal that they wouldn't be entitled to the public healthcare system. But as I understand it, that's a right that comes with anybody who chooses to be resident in Portugal. Is that
Yes.
right?
Once they are legal residents, they are entitled to the Portuguese public system. As you know, the Portuguese public system has its problems, but for instance, and it might change in the future, but for
Hmm.
instance, we had an American client that had diabetes type 1. I already mentioned that many times, and she spared at least 1,000 euros per month here because in Portugal, when a person has a disease that it's like the life depends on it, the Portuguese state in many cases pays fully the expense, the medical expenses. So she spared insulin, all the things that she had to use to measure the glycemic, all those things were paid by the Portuguese state and also other situations. But other than that, people again and again, my clients go to the public or private healthcare system and they do not believe, even without insurance, they do not believe what they are paying. The other day, I had someone working for me, they have a dermatologic problem and we went to a private hospital. The person didn't have an insurance and we had an excellent specialist, extremely experienced. We were able to get a consultation immediately and without an insurance, we pay a very, very good specialist and we paid 120 euros per
Wow.
consultation for an international point of view. And it was someone that with international standards was a very good doctor. As Portugal, normally the doctors and the healthcare, it's a very high level. We have institutions such as the Champalimau Foundation that are institutions in all the world and have excellent results in treatment of cancer. Portugal is a reference for pancreatic cancer, for instance. So the people that are treated here have, and it's proven, and it's a way of researching, but people that are here treated here for in a pancreatic center, cancer center, have more chances to survive than in most places in the world. So this is, I think this is also very important to address. Healthcare at a high level in Portugal costs at least 1/10 of the cost in the US, and it's a system that is still more focused on the client, most focused on the patient. So it's not only about earning money. There's still the conscience, the ethic conscience that a doctor should put the patient first.
Yes, I think It can probably be hard to get your head around that kind of concept, particularly if you're coming from the US, where you're checking, like, can I go to this hospital? Is it in network? Do I need to stay at my current job so that I can maintain insurance so that I can actually afford
Yes.
healthcare? Those are questions that people in Portugal don't need to ask. I mean, we talked about obviously the healthcare system having its problems, but it's quite liberating to know that you have the public healthcare system as a fallback option. You can rely on it completely if you want, or as we could maybe discuss, you can continue to have private health insurance, which could be another option as well if you want faster times to see specialists and things
And
like
I
that.
think it's important to know that in Portugal, it's for American standards and for Canadians and also for British standards, it's possible to have a healthcare that does not exclude existing conditions and without age limit. And it's still affordable, at least for international standards. And
Okay.
I think this is quite an important because it's a concern for all of us.
Sure, it definitely is. And yeah, the older you get, the more you start thinking about these things. And I guess it makes a big difference when you're deciding about another country. You're trying to work out like, oh, is this somewhere where I want to live, where I can feel
And
comfortable?
there's another positive aspect of our healthcare because normally in many places they ask about if to know if you know the prices before they do the treatments, which is not the case in the US. I'm getting a little bit old, as you know, notice, so I repeat
I
some of
hadn't
the
noticed.
story again and again. And so I had a friend, and we went to California one month ago, 1 year ago, more or less 1 year ago. And I had a friend that she had to stay overnight with the dog. And so she spent 8,000 euros. And then the dog was still ill. Okay, can you please bring me a glass of water? The dog got ill and stayed ill, although she paid all this money. Sorry. And then she had to come back. I had something in my throat, things that happen to elderly people. And she had to come back to Portugal with the ill dog. It was Christmas. And when she came here, she go to the vet hospital and they said the treatment is quite expensive. And she said, how much? And it was 100 euros. And they give him an injection and the dog got well. So I think she told me this story. She was the vice consul back then, as a paradox of the healthcare system in the United States and in Portugal. And I think this is quite an advantage. And it's also important that Portugal ranks very well worldwide in the healthcare system, although the US has a huge amount of fantastic research centers. The thing is, we still have a system that is not perfect, but in theory, at least, is universal system, and nobody should die because they could not afford a doctor. Although this is also, as you know, an important discussion still in Portugal, but the truth is that we have great advantages here.
I completely agree, and I think it's a discussion that I think European countries everywhere are having with about their health systems. When I speak to anybody from any other EU country, they always
Yes.
say, "Oh, we've got waiting lists." So I've never really come across a country in Europe that has really got it perfect. So I think it's something you will face anywhere
Yes,
that you
but
go to.
I think there's no perfect, but I think Germany, Switzerland, they give us the public system there. And with the COVID, I think German had more intensive units than the majority of other European countries. So I think those countries do have better systems. But the thing is, the system we have in Portugal, if we compare with other countries, still have great benefits. And the fact that the Portuguese like to help, to like to be of service, we like to stop, and if you have the time to explain the road or to give, we feel happy to do so. So I'm always a little puzzled when I go to Germany or when I go to the US and people don't want to stop to explain me a thing. And I, as a Portuguese that is happy to help, I always find it a little bit strange that they don't, sometimes they don't stop and continue their life, because we like to talk, to help. We like to say where the road is, to give some advice to those that are moving here. And I think this is a great benefit from all those that are moving here, when we see that are many people moving alone. And it's good to have a community and that is welcoming for foreigners. And Portugal has again and again been ranked as one of the most welcoming countries, and with also proficiency in English, which I think we meet a lot of important dots.
I think so. Definitely. Let's talk about the digital nomad visa, or what is now being called the D9.
Yes.
My understanding, just based on sort of what you've implied, Sandra, is that if you can qualify for the D7 visa and you're already, let's say, receiving Social Security or something like that, then you should go for that because that's the easiest one.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If you don't qualify for that, then this is probably the next one that someone might consider looking at, because it allows you to work remotely or freelance and live in Portugal. And particularly if you're coming from somewhere like the US, you can hopefully get a salary that's large enough to meet those requirements. Could you give us a little rundown of the visa for those that don't know it?
So this visa, as I told previously, they all have common requirements: proof of accommodation, proof of financial means, criminal record. In terms of proof of financial means, the D9, they require 4 Portuguese minimum wages, which at this point is something like 3,280 euros for the main applicant, plus 50% for a spouse if you come attached to your husband as a main applicant, or 30% for each child. As a proof, so this visa is for any, it's called digital nomad visa normally, but this might lead to misconception. So it is not limited to digital professions or tech professions. If you have any profession and you are being paid by a foreign entity, irrespective of the form of the contract that you're having, you can apply for a digital nomad visa. So it will be important to prove, especially that 3 months prior to the application, that you have on average shown the amount required. It's very important that you, and this sometimes you have to prepare a document, produce a document, sometimes with a little bit artificially, that you are allowed to work remotely. This is quite important. And you also sometimes it will also be helpful if you can show the proof, the transfers, money transfers, that you are earning this amount. If you have a company, to have the documents from the company would be advisable. Sometimes in UK, they did ask for a document from the accountant. So we noticed that the consulates and also IMA, that also plays a role in the early stage of the visas now, are getting more and more demanding in terms of the documents for the D9. So I would
Okay.
say you have to prove that you earn the minimum amount in the 3 months prior to the application. You have to prove writtenly, ideally, the contractual or any type of relationship being paid by a foreign entity. And it can be, it's irrelevant to form. The important element is that you're being paid by a foreign entity. And you can be an independent contractor, a service provider, someone working for another person under a labor contract, any type of contract and any type of professional relationship, as long as you are being paid by a foreign entity. again, I repeat, it's very important that you show a written authorization to work remotely. And if you have a company, to provide also documents from the company. I would say these are there might be some extras here and there, but these would be the main specific documentations for a D9 visa.
And one thing we've talked about this before, once you start adding a spouse or partner and children onto that, the income requirements become quite large. Is
Yes.
there any, like, let's say I earn 3,280 euros a month, and I have a spouse. Normally, I should have, I think, somewhere around 1,600 would be 50% of that. If I
Yes.
say have an extra 1,000 euros per month, do you think there would be any flexibility? I mean, that's still 4,000 euros a month. It's quite a decent salary in Portugal.
I would not say to any client that they are that is always risky. I think that
Okay.
they might be more tolerant. It might vary from place to place, but that would be risky because in the beginning, when the D9 was created, we had these doubts.
Okay.
Remember, but then we tried to clarify with the consulates, and the answer we got is that also in those cases it was necessary to have 50% for the spouse and 30% for each child.
Okay. So good to know. And your advice would be to have that income. Otherwise, you might face a rejection. Um,
But
let's
you,
see.
yes, we can always try to contact the consulate and ask them directly,
Mhm.
see if there would be any exception for those, or if a person shows also savings, and perhaps with the savings, but sometimes there are ways to overcome these situations. We have created with clients and been in some tough cases, we are able to overcome this, but it's not never guaranteed.
Okay. I had an interesting question from someone who has a job that they could do remotely and move to Portugal with, but then they were thinking about quitting that job once they've moved to Portugal, got the visa, and getting a job in Portugal. Do you think this would cause issues when it comes up for renewal?
I think this for sure will cause issues, but I think if you portray things the right way and if you study, you have to prepare and you have to get advice before doing that. And we have to seek a solution. And I think you might be able to overcome this and still prove that you have the financial means and you could be eligible for another visa or for another situation. I think you may be able to overcome, but I also think these will raise issues. It might be possible to overcome these, but for sure this will raise issues.
Okay. Going back to the idea that someone might have, a reasonable salary, but not enough for themselves and their spouse or something like that. Let's say I, was 500 euros a month short for my spouse, but I had some passive income coming in, like from a rental property, or I was already claiming social security. Do you think there's some way I could sort of mix and match incomes in that sort of situation?
In theory, no, but from a practical point of view, because what they have to access and verify is that you have the financial means to live in Portugal. So I think this we never know, but
Hmm.
might be a way. I think it's a good argument, and it's a reasonable argument to show that someone does have enough financial means to live in Portugal.
Okay. So it sounds like in those instances, it's a good idea to get in touch with someone like yourself, and you can give your opinion and then speak to the consulates and try and ascertain whether they would be happy with it.
Yes, yes, for sure.
Okay. If someone is self-employed or working remotely, what kind of documents do they need to provide to show that income?
I already
You
mentioned
you
that.
mentioned that.
So
Okay.
I would say you can show your bank statements, you can show receipts, you can show documentation from your accountancy if you have a company or if you have an accountant. So you can show a contract, a
Okay.
contract, a service provider contract. It's a written contract is always good, although we know it's not mandatory in many situations. So you might not have it. So in those cases that you don't have a written contract, it would be important to add more documentation. So they are
Okay.
sure that even you can ask the person, your clients, to write a declaration. You can ask your boss to write a declaration if you don't have a written contract. You can ask your accountant to write a declaration. So when you don't have a written contract, it would be important to reinforce other documentation in those cases.
Okay, good to know. Now, I know the digital nomad visa is just a nickname for what is now the D9,
Yeah.
but let's say I am a digital nomad type of person and I want flexibility to travel. Is the D9, because it is aimed at digital nomads, going to offer me more flexibility than the D7 visa?
No, it's equal in terms.
Okay.
I've been repeating this again and again in many aspects of the legal regime, other than the financial requirements. These two visas follow exactly the same regime. I think the great difference is the financial requirements and the documentation needed in terms of financial requirements. But other than these two visas follow the same regime, and it's exactly the same regime in terms of the ability to travel within the Schengen space, as
Okay.
all other residential visas.
Would you say this a visa we haven't really talked about too much is the D2 visa aimed at entrepreneurs? Would you
Yeah.
say that that follows the same regime?
Yes, in those,
Okay.
yes. Other
And
than the requirements,
mhm.
follows the same regime in terms of the ability to travel within the Schengen space, the access to citizenship, to the necessity to show proof of accommodation, to show a clean criminal record. In many aspects, they follow the same regime. An application form, accompanying family members, in many aspects, they follow the same regime as other residential visas, except for the specific requirements.
Okay. And going on to specific requirements, obviously the D2 is an entrepreneurial visa. It's for people that want to start a business in Portugal or move one here. Is there like an understanding of the type of businesses that Portugal is looking to attract? Like if I have an idea for to open a shop in Lisbon, for example, is that good enough, or do they want like the next Google or something grander?
Well, I think I would say in Portugal show that in many legislative measures, in many legal initiatives. I think Portugal and the Portuguese government and also the previous government, they want people with innovative projects, environmental projects, projects that might create jobs, projects that would develop the most remote areas, from not in the big cities, in the central cities, but in other places. So I think environment, tech products, innovative projects, um, projects that would create jobs and developed remote areas. I think for the Portuguese government that this would be relevant projects and this will be appreciated for the Portuguese government. I think, but the Portuguese government we also have tax benefits for all those that create this kind of initiatives. So these, I would say, these would be the preferred types of businesses for a D2. Not
Okay.
so much commercial, but
Hmm.
it's innovative projects, projects that create jobs, especially in remote areas, um, projects that help to protect the environment, that would help communities, social work. I think these were areas that are particularly shared and appreciated and supported by the Portuguese government.
Okay, that's good to know. One thing that I can imagine people doing is looking through these lists of visas and they're going, okay, the D7, that would be ideal, but I don't have social security or a pension. The digital nomad visa, I don't have a remote job. So now they're sort of getting down to what are the other options, which are sort of like a golden visa, which is a lot of money to invest, D2, which is
And
starting to
the golden visa, a lot of money to invest and a long time to proceed. So golden visa is taking at this time more than 2 years, sometimes three, to
hmm
to get a card, and you never know, and it's difficult to renew. So I think, and people have to invest 500,000 euros, whereas with the D7, the D8, the D2, they don't have to do zero investment. So I think this is are very, very relevant. And for me as a lawyer, I can never vouch for golden visa unless for all those persons that cannot reside in Portugal and would have to like to have a safe harbor for the remote future and that
hmm
don't want to come, because for
Okay.
all other persons, I don't have a face to vouch for a golden visa and then having them contacting me again and again saying, why is it taking so long? And I have
Okay.
no answer to give.
Okay, that's I think that's good advice. And it sort of, yeah, it goes back to sort of saying, people are working through the visas, trying to work out which one would be best for them. And one thing that I see people asking in the comments as well is that they have adult children. They might qualify for, their parents might qualify for a D7 visa. Now they're trying to work out, how do my kids come here? Presumably you can't add adult children to a D7 or something like that very easily. What would you recommend people think about, like going back to university in Portugal, getting a remote job in the US and trying to do the digital nomad visa? Do you have any advice there?
In Portugal, adult children, if they are 23 till 25 and they are studying, they're normally considered dependent and
Okay.
accepted as dependent, although they are adult children. Um, if they want to come, I think we have been student visa can be a route.
hmm
Sometimes, until now, it has been accepted studying languages. It has
Okay.
been accepted as a route for student visa, but Portugal also ranks very well in many, many masters. For instance, Nova in another universities,
hmm
Católica rank very well for masters. So studying in Portugal also might be a possibility. Or sometimes the people can apply for certain jobs in Portugal, and these are also a possibility for visas here. So there are
Okay.
several possibilities for visas to come to Portugal.
Several possibilities.
Or
Let's.
if you're talking of wealthy people or with some financial means, it is possible to that your child, that you buy a house in your home country for the child and to get rentals, or to put some money in name of your child, and this child can receive benefits or dividends or interests or royalties or some other financial income that could suffice for D7.
Okay, so there's a lot of creative strategies, and I guess if people are falling into that situation where they're not sure how to bring their adult children there, speak to you, and you and your team can come up with an action plan.
Yes.
Um, One other way that people move to Portugal is typically if one person in the relationship or in the family has an EU passport, they can bring certain family members with them. However, has a lot of delays, and it seems to be affecting family reunification a lot. Do you have any advice on whether people, like if I'm, say, the husband, my wife is Portuguese. I'm very lucky to have met a Portuguese woman in this instance. But should I just move to Portugal with her, try and get a NIMA appointment and wait, or should I apply for a D7 or digital nomad visa myself?
If your wife can apply, you are the EU citizen, right?
I am no my wife in this instance. My wife would be the EU citizen, and I would be, say, an American.
Okay, you should. I think a D7 might be a good possibility for you.
Just with the delays at the moment.
Yes, it's until now it's easier to proceed with the D7 than with a family reunification for the spouse of an EU citizen.
Okay, good. Good to know. I know we've got a lot more questions coming in about different things. So if people do ask them in the chat, in the, sorry, the Q&A section, if we don't get to them during this time, Sandra, I'm sure your team will get back to them and follow up. Do we have any differences between dealing with IMA on the in Madeira and the Azores versus the mainland? Are they the same procedures? Is it easier or harder?
Um, no, it depends on normally outside of Lisbon and the big cities, public authorities always are a little bit more relaxed and less work, so it's easier. But not there is not a difference. You cannot say that you can see a clear difference in the Azores or Madeira.
Okay. Um, and then it's a similar-ish question. Lots of places in Portugal, like Lisbon, like the Algarve, have seen the cost of living go up, and there's obviously plenty of foreigners now living there. I'm sure the Portuguese government would like to see more people moving to, say, central Portugal and places that we discussed before, the north of Portugal. If I put on my application, this is where I've rented a property. Am I more likely to get a favorable response for moving to one of those places versus somewhere like the Algarve?
No, I've never
Okay.
seen this difference, although I see people coming from everywhere in the world. So going people coming from everywhere in the world and going to the different places. So we have clients in Tomar, clients in Braga, clients in the Silver Coast, a lot of clients in many locations. So we
Okay.
can see that this difference. If you choose Lisbon or Porto, you're not jeopardized because of this.
Okay, good to know because we all love Lisbon and Porto too. Um, a few people I've noticed have Portuguese grandparents and they're thinking about applying for citizenship, but we know that citizenship applications are taking maybe like 2 years at the moment or thereabouts. If they apply for residency, does having a Portuguese grandparent help them in any way on the application?
I think yes. I think
Okay.
it's a positive aspect. Not again, it's not a mandatory, it's not a decisive element, but it helps.
Okay, so there's no say, I know some countries have a visa. If you already have a grandparent from there, you just apply for this ancestral visa and you can move there. Portugal doesn't have one of those.
Excuse me, can
Por-
you repeat?
Yeah, of course. I know some countries have what they call, I think, an ancestral visa. So if you have a grandparent from that country, it makes it easy for you to move there. As from what you're saying, Portugal doesn't have this, but putting it
Doesn't
on the
matter.
up.
But we just had an Indian client and she had a Portuguese surname, and
Mhm.
immediately her visa was processed much quicker
Okay.
than all the others. So I think it's a very favorable aspect because we know from a practical point of view that it helps and it's good if you have a Portuguese surname and that you mentioned that you have Portuguese grandparents. Although you don't have Portuguese nationality, it does help.
Does help. Okay, good to know. Let's see what other questions we have then. So, just a couple more on citizenship, seeing as we're talking about that there. Someone here has been married to their Portuguese husband for almost 31 years, and they want to get citizenship through marriage. They went to the embassy in the US, and they were told that in order to get this citizenship through marriage, they would first have to move to Portugal and live there for 3 months and then file the paperwork. Is this something you've ever heard of before?
No, it doesn't make
Okay.
any sense.
Okay.
It's not
So
a formal requirement at all. Yeah.
perhaps they could try and submit that application through you because I know you can do citizenship
Yes.
applications as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Help lots of our clients and yes.
When someone obtains citizenship, let's say through parents or a spouse, do they get granted a NIF at the same time, the NIF number, or is this
No,
something
no,
separate?
everybody can be granted an if as long as they ask for it, but it's not related. It's a misconception that there's any connection with citizenship and being granted an if.
Okay. And this might be a difficult question to answer, but some people seem to get their citizenship approved faster than others. Like sometimes people will submit it more or less the same time, and someone will get it a few months earlier. Is there any reason why some take longer than others, or is it hard to say?
I think when sometimes it's through a descendant, it's easier. The process it's easier and the documentation are easier. So this is normally an easier way to get Portuguese citizenship.
Okay, good. Good to know. And I assume when people are applying for citizenship or anything like that, it doesn't make any difference whether the grandparents are still alive or not.
No, it doesn't make difference. Sometimes when they're alive, it's easier to get the documents. Because
Okay.
sometimes we have to get the documents, and when there are old documents, it's difficult. And also to know whether grandparents kept the Portuguese citizenship, especially with Americans, or they had to relinquish the Portuguese citizenship to acquire the American citizenship. So in terms of documentation, if they are not alive, sometimes we might have additional challenges.
Okay. I can see some people asking sort of about timings for the D7. I know this is a very difficult question to answer, but some people are sort of thinking like, oh, I want to move to Portugal. So, next September, when should I be submitting my application and how long is it going to take me to get a response back from the consulate?
So anyone that deals with Portuguese public services know that it's not honest to give strict timelines because we cannot count on them. But let's imagine that you are in a consulate that doesn't have a big backlog. You get the
Mhm.
appointment. Let's imagine you were an American, you'll be getting an appointment tomorrow, the 15th of November. You should, if there is no backlog at all, you should get your passport stamped on the 15th of December. And if
Okay.
you had anything ready, you could come to Portugal on the 15th of December, and probably 4 months after this time. So by the 15th of March, you would have the IMA appointment, and then you'd receive a provisional document, and 1 to 2 months from that time, you'll receive a residence permit card. So, but by the time after having the passport, the visa on your passport, you could come in Portugal and you could stay here in a definitive way to wait for the final formalities of the visa.
Okay, I
Was that
think
clear?
that's helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into this
Yes,
that could
for
change
instance,
things.
recently San Francisco was taking till 3 months to get the passport stamp. So it depends from consulate to consulate. It depends from time to time. Uh, it depends. There are many factors that can have an impact on how long things take. But if you want to move, I think the sooner the better. Now, at this
Okay. At this point. And you mentioned there when you go to have your IMA appointment, you will be given a temporary document. Sort of would this be enough to allow you to register for the health service, or do you need to wait for your full
yeah,
permit?
you need we've managed in some cases to register for healthcare without the final document, but the authorities do demand that you have a resident permit card before you can register in the national healthcare system.
Okay, so it sounds like by the time you get to Portugal, you could be waiting 4 months or so for your appointment with IMA and possibly another two to get this. So you sort of expect like 6 months of
Yes,
settling into all
yes,
your
but you can,
documents
yes, but you can live in Portugal, start living in Portugal.
but you can live in
After,
Portugal.
yes, as soon as you have your passport stamped.
And another thing that we haven't touched upon is that that time is already counted towards citizenship, right? Right from the moment that passport is
Yes, yes,
stamped.
because there was a recent change in the nationality law that you take into account the moment you start the application.
Okay. Well, I think that is very good news for those that are applying. They could, yeah, if you were, like you said, if you were submitting your application tomorrow, you might have it stamped in a month. And from that point, 5 years later, you would then be eligible to apply for Portuguese citizenship.
Yes, for sure.
Um, I think anybody listening, particularly from somewhere like the US, who's thinking about another life in Europe, knowing that they could potentially be applying for citizenship in an EU country that quickly is probably some very good news for this Thursday afternoon. Um, let's see what other. We've got a couple more questions, Sandra. I know you're obviously very busy with all the people that have been in touch. So do you want to answer one or two more, and then we can.
Of course, gladly. And then as a disclaimer for all those that I was not able to answer their specific questions, come back to us. We will try to answer them as app and to provide you a 15-minute free Zoom call with us.
Okay, we do have pets is a question that comes up. I know there's some specifics for bringing pets over in terms of microchipping and things like that. What should people expect to be required?
So there are lots of little documents. I have someone that takes care of this here in the office. It's not a big stuff, but we can send the documents immediately to all those that want to bring a pet. What we can say is that Portugal definitely is a pet-friendly country. So we managed to get from many of our clients the best solution for pets transportation. We make sure they are not traumatized. We have Alex from our team. I've been telling this again and again. If she could pay for private jets for the pets, she would. And we also manage sometimes to get apartments for people that are bringing pets and wanted to make sure, because not all landlords and landladies accept pets, but for sure Portugal and our team, what I can guarantee you is Portugal is pet friendly. Our team is super pet friendly.
Okay. Good to know, because there were a lot of questions about pets in there, and I know that'll be a deciding factor even for some people on whether they
Yes,
come to
yes. I
Portugal.
think Alexander will make sure that the pets gets the best one ever. Yes, I think
Okay.
we should organize the plane with all our clients bringing pets, because with the amount of clients we have, I think it would be possible to get a plane to with all the pets would not be with in the yes in with the other luggage.
Maybe that's something for next time an SGP plane chartered from the US
Yes,
with everybody's pets.
yes, yes, for sure. I think this is the business now.
Was okay, one more question that I see people asking. In terms of leaving Portugal, so the first step obviously is getting to Portugal and moving there. And I think people might underestimate how much work is involved in that. But then people are also thinking like, oh, I want to be able to go back to the US or the UK or wherever I come from. I want to be able to travel within the Schengen area. What could you tell people about sort of the time they need to spend in Portugal and what they can spend out?
As you know, in Europe, we don't have borders. So until now, the time they spend traveling within the Schengen space is has not been, from a very practical point of view, has not been a problem in terms to comply with the minimum stay requirements for the residential visas. Until now, the Portuguese authorities have been extremely tolerant. So if you have to go to your home country or to your country of nationality or legal residency because you have to attend a family member that's ill for professional reasons, and you cannot stay in Portugal for the whole time, minimum stay, you cannot comply with the minimum stay requirements of a visa, this has not been a question. And it's important to bear in mind that this is only analyzed by the renewal within 2 years. But until now, by the time of the renewals, the Portuguese authorities have been analyzing and understanding if Portugal is real the place where you have your family life center, if this is really your home. This has been the main element. And so people may take into account that until now, the Portuguese authorities have been quite tolerant and not very strict at all in terms of the minimum times to stay in Portugal. And if you have a reason to attend a family member, to attend an ill parent, to professional reasons, and you cannot stay the whole time required by the law, until now, this has been accepted and this has been treated with extreme tolerance. I cannot assure that it will be always like that, but this is what we have to say in a very practical terms.
I think that's very helpful. I think that's practical. And yes, I think for most people there, I think it's more an emergency thing. Like, obviously, people want to go back home from time to time, but it's more what happens if there's an emergency? Will I be able to go out and see a family member who's unwell, or if I need to travel for work or something like that? So it's good to know that there is an understanding there for people.
Yes, there is, for sure.
Well, Sandra, I can see we've got a lot of questions still, but we're never actually going to get on top of them. And some of them are quite specific because yeah, there's so many questions people have. So some of them are quite specific. I think the best thing would be for your very wonderful team to reply to them individually. I can pass on the ones that weren't answered to you, and people have your email address as well, which I'm going to put in the chat, and so that people have. I will also share the recording that goes up on YouTube with everybody, and your email address and that special password as well, so that they can be one of the first 50.
Okay, great again. It's a great pleasure for me to do this with you. It's a great pleasure to be here and to provide this kind of information. And I thank the patience of all those that the specific questions were not answered. But please contact us. So the first will have a free Zoom with us, and we will try to provide answer for them.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, Sandra. I really appreciate all the information you've shared. It's been fantastic. So thank you once again.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Bye bye.